one. Oh, we've got one open for you.
That was a good question though, Carmen, because social media doesn't equal Facebook, and that's why I want to bash my head against the wall sometimes, because the client or an organisation will always think it's a Facebook page and then they're afraid because of all the negative things they've heard about Facebook, but it could be a corporate blog to set them down to the ground, or a LinkedIn profile. There's so much more. They might have a Flickr page because they're an image-intense company. And social media is not Facebook, it's so much more.
I just wanted to ask how, as professional communicators, do you think we can best handle the emergence of less scrupulous players in the market, selling things like follower boosts and guaranteed numbers of followers?
That's really tricky. That's like the social media guru question.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, you know, the same what we have with search engine optimization experts. I guarantee you that I will be able to get you a #1 spot, you know, and it'll only cost you $500. Well, I might be able to get you the #1 spot, but it'll last there for about 30 seconds. And exactly the time that I take that, you know, that grab, that screenshot, just to show you a #1, and then off you go. Or some obscure keyword.
You have to bring the client back to what are they doing it for, and don't do it for the follow numbers. If followers are in Brazil, or they're a totally different age bracket or wage bracket, then you're interested in it. It's nothing. So follower numbers, they're nice, and if they're in your target market, they're fantastic. But so those kind of boosts don't really make sense. It has to align with their strategy. Try, you know, to hold them back from getting too excited about that.
So I'm just conscious of the time, but just I guess a final question just before we wrap up. But just through the tweet feed, what are your thoughts on putting a human voice to an otherwise corporate organisation, and perhaps what challenges does that pose?
Social media is really good for that. I've seen so many CEs start their own blog and become more of a face of the organisation, and that's not just for external audiences, but their internal audiences too, that might never bump into the CE or hear his or her thoughts. And social media is great for putting a human face on organisations.
I would strongly suggest that if you have clients that are large employers, that you very seriously talk to them about social media behind the firewall, because it is a massive opportunity for people inside of the organisations to share ideas, to improve processes, to generate new ideas. It is a fantastic way of doing things. Deloitte in Australia have done some phenomenal work, which they never expected, because they just decided to open up Yammer, for example, behind the firewall, which is Twitter behind the firewall, and some YouTube videos, and suddenly there's all this groundswell of creativity came out of their normal consultancy base, and they came up with some fantastic ideas. So don't forget behind the firewall stuff.
A little case study example of that for us would be when a government organisation is doing what we call place-based work, where you have place managers, so people whose job it is to go out and actually get to know a particular community. And they're the go-to people for that community. For that person to also have a blog presence, or to have a blog that as part of a project website, that sort of thing, but where it's their face and it's their voice and they're actually doing the blogging, it's a nice way to maintain their connection with their community, rather than it just being a faceless organisational what we call a news feed, which is just sort of more or less the media release that's going out through it. To actually have it as a personalised response, where you've already put so much organisational effort into creating these positions and getting people out there, and there's a lot of budget behind them, then it's just a nice additional tool to add to their suite. So we always encourage organisations to try to put a face behind these things if we can.
I can't remember who it was. It was someone here in Adelaide made the comment last week on Twitter, or beginning of this week, that they recognised on a company website the customer service people. They had photos of the customer service people, and they went to one of the online photo gallery places, iStock Photo or something, and they saw exactly the same photos available, and it just failed, big fail. So if you're going to do this social media stuff and you're going to put names to faces, and you're going to put the photos of people, and make it real. And the whole thing about stalking, if I wanted to stalk someone, I wouldn't have to, use social media to do it. You know, I could quite easily stalk anyone without having to worry about social media. So don't worry about putting, you know, people's photos up.
Scary comments from memory, black t-shirt.
But you'd fairly easily recognise me, let's face it.
So we've got time for a couple more questions before we wrap up, but just while people are thinking about them. We've just got to live through a federal election. I welcome your observations as far as how did the parties use social media to try and swing voters? Was it more this time around just because they're getting more and more used to and comfortable with using social media?
I actually think we went back.
Yeah.
From the 2007 election. Labor, the Kevin 17 was massive. I mean, they mirrored the Obama campaign as much as they could afford to in an Australian context. And this time it was like everybody was surprised that it was all happening and they didn't have a chance to get organised. And they, maybe because they were running the style of campaign, there wasn't a lot of sort of division stuff out there. They chose not to use social media as an engagement process this time, except, let's say, for the Greens. I mean, they used it effectively because it's perfect for their target market. But the two major parties, I wasn't impressed at all with what they did.
Totally concur.
Politicians don't use social media very well. It's just too scary for them. I likened it to shutting a poly in a community hall, allowing 50 constituents for 24 hours. Why would we want to do that? It's too hard. It's too much, and they can't commit to that back and forth, responding to questions and the inevitable, harassment and criticism that they'll get. So they'd rather just use it as a broadcast tool, the safe way, but it lets them down, it lets us down.
The two pollies that I follow a few on Twitter, but the most engaging, doesn't reveal anything about my voting patterns, trust me, but the most engaging people on Twitter, I think, are Malcolm Turnbull and, just forgotten his name, the former opposition treasury spokesperson, the big guy, Joe Hockey, yeah. They both tweet about personal stuff, and it's quite, he was tweeting about the fact that yesterday morning he went outside to put the garbage out and the chaser guys were outside, and he normally does it in his PJs, so he was relieved that he got dressed this time. And he tweets from the house, from the house a lot of the time as well, and that's kind of interesting and nice to see. But no strategy, no broad strategy from either side. So it's just sad.
Has anyone heard of the term pajama Houdini? Well, that's what people like me are, because I blog from home, and there's a lot of us who blog, in our pajamas. So instead of the mujahideen or something, we're a pajama Houdini, and we aim to try and sort of tear companies down and tear politicians down. And so if you get the opportunity to blog and blog about politics, then consider yourself, if you do it in your pajamas, you're part of the pajama Houdini. You rock.
And for those who haven't seen the Bob Hatter election video on YouTube, it wasn't seriously funny, so I urge you to have a look at that really the opportunity. Any more questions from the floor?
Hi, I've been speaking to somebody recently who wants to promote Australia to backpackers, and they want them to use their service, and they don't have a social media presence at the moment. What would you say is the first three things that they should do?
Come and see Hughes PR.
.com.
I have the answer already. I just want to test you.
Test the experts.
There's a backpacker market.
It's a perfect market.
Yeah, it's a good online market.
I mean, one of the things about backpackers, you might want to check MySpace. Because all the big things about Facebook, but let's not forget that MySpace hasn't gone away. It's diminished in importance, but it's still a very important market for fashion, or fashionistas and music lovers. So don't forget MySpace in your calculations.
Well, we're talking social media here in a fairly DIY approach. Can you give some advice as to perhaps when you would call in a professional, such as Brady?